Right, so hello everyone. Thank you first of all to everyone for such interesting talks and activities today and for allowing me the opportunity to speak. So rather than boring you with my PhD research, I'm going to talk about something a bit different. So I've been doing a placement for the past 6 months at the Sainsbury Centre in Norwich, working as a research assistant, aiding in the delivery of a series of exhibitions. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the current exhibition season and the issues that it tackles before looking at one of the specific projects in more detail called Liquid Gender. I'm going to wrap up at the end of this end of the talk by tentatively connecting the artists in Liquid Gender with some of the goals and ethics of posthumanism, which I employ in my PhD research. So just to give you a bit of, oh, it's repeated Sainsbury. There you go. You've got double Sainsbury Centre. Yes, so just to give you a bit of background, the Sainsbury Centre is an art gallery and museum on the campus of the University of East Anglia in Norwich. It opened in the 70s and houses art and ethnographic collections. They've recently relaunched in the past couple of years with a new focus on living art, exploring art and material culture as sentient and vibrant, and encouraging us to engage with art and museums in new ways. Along with the relaunch, there's been a new approach to programming, focused on 6-month seasons that centre on urgent and fundamental questions. So the question that I've been focusing on for the last 6 months is, what is truth? So this exhibition season is running from the 17th of February to the 20th of October this year, and is centred on this fundamental question. It examines issues such as whether we can trust the media we can consume and what it means to be your true self, with a focus on image and representation. So I'm briefly just going to walk you through some of the projects that fall under what is truth before kind of focusing in more on one of them in particular. So to start with, one of the projects is titled In Event of Moon Disaster. So the premise, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, is widely quoted as being the phrase uttered by Neil Armstrong as he made man's first step onto the moon. But what if this had never happened? In Event of Moon Disaster was the title of a speech prepared for President Nixon in case of a catastrophe. The speech was never aired, but in this installation, it is. Using deepfake technology, the artists Halsey Bergand and Francesca Panetta have created the scenario of a failed moon landing. Streamed via a vintage television, audiences are immersed in a 1960s living room in an experience that has the power to make audiences reconsider whether we can believe the media that we consume. Moving swiftly on. So another of the projects is called The Camera Never Lies. This is curated by Tristan London, the Insight Project. This essentially reevaluates some of the most iconic images that have shaped our understanding of global events. Looking at the way photography has been used to present facts as well as to question dominant perceptions of the truth. It explores the ways in which we see photographs in newspapers, museums, and online, and how this affects our understanding of the world. The exhibition also includes original photographs from the 20th century that have come to represent iconic events through their repeated use in print journalism that supersede their original context as illustration to text. But it also includes works by photographic artists who use the medium to question assumed truths about the world that may be hidden, including government surveillance, domestic violence, and the effect of conflict on civilian populations. Often these artists use photography in unconventional ways to shine a light on the marginalized and overlooked. And the third project I just want to talk about very briefly is an exhibition dedicated to the artist Jeffrey Gibson. He's recently become the first Indigenous solo artist to represent the US at the Venice Biennale. And this represents his first solo exhibition in the UK Museum. The show will incorporates his murals, paintings, textiles, and historical objects that Jeffrey himself has personally selected from the Rivers Museum from the 18th and 19th centuries that reference aspects of his Indigenous background. The exhibition combines many of his points of reference, including indigenous aesthetics, his incorporation of textual and lyrics, poetry, and his own writing, abstraction, fashion, and popular culture. As well as considering Gibson's own relationships to these objects and their cultural histories, the installation prompts us to consider how indigenous cultures have historically been displayed within museums. It also illuminates the rich practice of abstraction in indigenous art, going against the common narrative within UK museums that abstraction emerged in Europe in the 20th century. So it was just a bit of a brief whistle-stop tour, but we're going to focus more here on liquid gender. So this exhibition explores how our cultural context shapes gender identity and expression, reflecting on the fluid nature of identity. Judith Butler, for instance, argues that all gender is an imitation of social conventions. If we are indeed shaped by external factors, this exhibition asks, how do I know my true self? Liquid Gender features artwork by 5 artists who draw on pre-colonial traditions to convey fluid gender concepts and celebrate individuality and community. Within, they use portraiture and images of the body to express LGBTQIA+ identities and assert the visibility of marginalized communities. Collectively, they use techniques of performance and collage in combining cultural traditions to create indigenous and black queer futures, drawing on Afrofuturism and indigenous futurism. The exhibition challenges binary gender norms, asserting that diverse gender expressions on display cannot be reduced to oscillations between male and female, but are an assertion of something beyond this spectrum. To be liquid is to be shapeless, and therefore to be anything. At its heart, liquid gender is about escaping imposed limitations and claiming the right to self-determination, to be able to flow fully and freely. Jose Esteban Munoz's concept of queerness as an ideality that inspires a future where individuals can imagine alternative identities is reflected in the themes of the exhibition. And they write, and I'm just going to read a quote here. Queerness is not yet here. Queerness is an ideality. Put another way, we are not yet queer, but we can feel it as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. We have never been queer, yet queerness exists for us as an ideality that can be distilled from the past and used to imagine a future. The future is queerness's domain. So the first artist I'd like to introduce to you is Rashad Newsom. Rashad Newsom creates hybrid figures using both physical and digital techniques to collage them from different materials and source images. They're interested in collage as a metaphor for the construction of African American identity based on memories and fragments of cultures from Africa. Newsom takes much of their source material from objects from Africa that are now held in museums in Europe and America. They combine them to create new figures, often with images from different perspectives in a technique Newsom describes as neo-cubism. Rashad Newsom is carrying out a residency with the Sainsbury Centre as well, and their new work will be added to this space during the exhibition. In the absence of evidence, we create stories will be a holographic sculpture collage from images of objects from Africa in the Sainsbury Centre collection, which speaks about their past, present, and futures. Newsom has also selected objects from the Sainsbury Centre collections presented alongside their work in this pink triangle sort of temple that you can enter in the exhibition space. So I don't know why it's repeated all the names. So the next artist is Layla Babarai. So like Rashad Newsom, Babarai references masks from Africa in her work. She made masks for her friends during Pride to conceal their identities in native Uganda, where homosexuality is outlawed. And she was herself publicly outed in the Ugandan press. She has since sought asylum in the US, where she's developed her artistic practice in sculpture. In her work, she creates representations of the queer Black community, giving her works clan names, as queer people in Uganda are often rejected by their families, as well as the sculpted mask that is on the left of the image here. She is displaying works on paper that convey this community. She questions the requirement to represent ourselves in identity cards against plain backdrops and with neutral expressions and ornamentation. Instead, she proposes a freer world which encourages self-expression through her queer identity card series. And this is an example of one. And so this next artist, Martín Gutiérrez, is a transdisciplinary artist who works with film, photography, and performance. She has created billboards, film, music videos using the strategies of consumerism to critique them. She shines a light on the objectification and sexualization within advertising and fashion. She rejects a binary approach to gender and instead believes that it is entangled. The pieces that we have here are from her Indigenous Woman collection, a publication she produced in 2018, where she acted as a model, photographer, stylist, makeup artist, writer, director, and producer. She created it to convey her own fluid identity that bridges gender and ethnicity and to critique prevalent beauty standards. I've got a quote from her here from her editor's note. She says, "The word indigenous here is used to refer to native culture from a particular region, but also as a synonym for the natural and innate. It signifies a real, authentic, native-born woman. There was a time when I believed there was no such title for me to claim. I was driven to question how identity is formed, expressed, valued, and weighed as a woman, a trans woman, as a Latinx woman, as a woman of indigenous descent, as a femme artist and maker. It is nearly impossible to arrive at any finite answers, but for me, this process of exploration is exquisitely life-affirming." So we'll just move on to the final artist here. So finally, we have Larissa Machado and Antonia Vital Neto Pancararu. Here we have on display a project called Origem. It's a visual art project that portrays LGBTQI plus Indigenous people long before coloniality named them with these terms. In the text for these artworks, they talk about how the first case of homophobic violence in Brazil happened to a Tupinamba man called Tabira, which is also the Indigenous Tupi word for sexual dissident, in 1614, ordered by the Catholic Church. They say that we are now in 2024 and it's still necessary to push for the freedom to be what you are and to demand respect. These works are from a project that took place in early 2020 in the indigenous territories of the Pancararu and Tupinamba de Olivença peoples in northeastern Brazil. And they feature a combination of photography and augmented reality. I'll just leave you with a final quote from them. "We wanted to tell real stories based on intimacy and belonging, and that also touched on questions of spirituality and gender and sexuality. But the main point was to connect with the lives of people living in freedom, living freely in their territories, loving whom they choose and being who they are." So that's a whistle-stop tour of liquid gender. So I just want to kind of towards the tail end of this, tentatively connect this to some of my own research into posthumanism. So in my thesis work, I employ a posthuman feminist perspective. What does this mean? What does it have to do with these artists? So at the heart of posthumanism is a critique of humanism. It problematizes the essentialist character of the human imagined by humanism. The ideal, unchanging subject of liberal humanism is white, male, civilized, middle class, educated, heterosexual, rational, and able-bodied. This ideal human sets the standard, and from here spins out a hierarchy as people get further and further away from these ideals. So while humanism is espoused as being about equality, this is in fact a very limited type of human. And from this position, people are excluded. This can be seen in cases where people are denied protections or rights, are colonized, can be seen in attitudes towards refugees, the homeless, the disabled. Moreover, this ideal humanist character exists outside of time, impervious to history or culture. From this alone, posthumanism fits quite nicely with this exhibition. The artists within are striving for self-determination, are rendering lives visible that would traditionally be excluded in this humanist model on multiple fronts. And these artists themselves have felt the limitations imposed upon them, be it being publicly outed in Uganda or experiencing the legacies of colonialism in Brazil. There's so much I could say here in order to draw out connections, but I, of course, only have limited time. So something I want to end with is Gilles Deleuze's approach to thought and to the idea of problems, to consider how these artworks aren't just a critique or representation of lives outside this human model. So in challenging the humanist character I outlined, Deleuze asks us to challenge our ideas of where thought comes from, rather than originating from the thinking, rational subject of humanism, the essentialist human I've referred to. Deleuze argues that people and subjects are the effects of other processes and relationships. We are produced through our relations. As a result, thought can't stem from us, but occurs through our constant interaction with other things, the way that we are always immersed in many assemblages of humans and non-humans. Thought, like everything else, is immanent and not separate from the world, but produces it. Thought in this way is nomadic and productive, and for Deleuze is fundamentally about solving problems. Through solving problems or exercising thoughts, we can make virtual possibilities actual. To show that problem solving isn't conceptual, but material too, Deleuze's own example of a problem is the eye, which he sees as being a response to a specific problem, the problem of an organism, the light problem. In this manner, I see these artworks as solving problems too, problems of limitation, of repression, of discrimination. Art in this way is not just a representation of an idea, but something that does things, a materialization of thought and problem solving that, as we engage with it, has a real potential to ripple outward and create material changes. As such, these artists fit really nicely with the posthumanist project as a whole, which stresses the collective responsibility we have in affecting change and how working on projects and problems can get us there. I don't see these artists as merely envisioning Black, queer, and Indigenous futures, but as actually making these futures happen. Yes, it's on until October, end of October, so plenty of time to go down to Norwich. Very much. Oh.